This revenge story contains intense acts of retribution that may be excessive and could be disturbing to some viewers.
The alarm clock buzzed, a jarring 6 a.m. reminder. I slapped the snooze button, a practiced motion I'd performed countless mornings. The dim light of the early dawn was just beginning to creep through the blinds of our bedroom window. Kate was still asleep next to me, her breathing soft and rhythmic. I watched her for a moment, a small smile tugging at the corner of my mouth. We were creatures of habit, our lives as predictable as the sunrise. She usually slept in a little longer than me. I always liked watching her sleep. I rolled out of bed, the plush carpet cool beneath my feet. The apartment was quiet, except for the low hum of the refrigerator. It was a 2-bedroom in a mid-rise building just outside the city. Nothing fancy, but comfortable. It was home. The smell of the coffee I'd set to brew filled the air as I walked into the kitchen. I poured myself a cup, the dark liquid a familiar comfort. I glanced at the calendar on the fridge. Another week of the same routine. Work, dinner, maybe a movie on the weekend. Kate would be up soon, ready to start her day. I enjoyed the quiet before that happened. My job at the insurance company was, in a word, mundane. I crunched numbers, analyzed spreadsheets, and attended meetings that felt like they were designed to drain the last vestiges of enthusiasm from my soul. I'd been doing it for nearly 15 years. It paid the bills, and that was that. It wasn't my dream job, but it was a stable job, and that was important. I had my escape, though. Baseball. The Mets were my team through and through, for better or for worse, and I followed them religiously. I spent my evenings and weekends watching games, reading about stats, and fantasizing about the day they'd finally win the World Series again. I also loved movies, old classics mostly, the kind they used to play at the old movie theater downtown. I could lose myself for hours in those worlds, a welcome distraction from the monotony of my day job. Kate and I, well, we were comfortable, maybe too comfortable. We had our routines, her trips to the casino a few times a week, me with my baseball and movies. We had our own spaces, our own ways of passing the time. It wasn't a passionate, fiery romance, more like a quiet agreement, a comfortable coexistence. She had her world, I had mine, and that seemed like enough. At least it had up until recently. She never did understand the draw of baseball, and I found her love for the casino frustrating, but we didn't get in each other's way. We were two ships passing in the night, content, or so I thought, to be in the same harbor. I finished my coffee and started to get ready for work. As I was buttoning up my shirt, Kate walked into the kitchen, her hair still a little tousled from sleep. She had her usual sleepy smile on her face. "Morning," she said, her voice a little husky. "Morning," I replied, giving her a quick peck on the cheek. "Coffee's ready." She poured herself a cup. She took a sip and sat at the kitchen table checking her phone. I glanced at her as I grabbed my briefcase, a small pang of something I couldn't name hitting my chest. We used to have conversations in the morning. We used to talk, laugh, and share what was on our minds. Over the years, we'd become comfortable with quietness. "See you later," I said. "Yeah, have a good day." I walked out the door, the hum of the refrigerator fading behind me. It was just another day, or so I thought. I had no idea how much that ordinary day would become the last ordinary day for me. I didn't realize how much that quiet, predictable life meant to me. Now looking back, I understand the simplicity of what I had taken for granted. The quiet hum of the refrigerator was more comforting than I had realized. The kiss on the cheek, a simple act of love and comfort. I did not understand what would happen to me, that quiet and comfortable life, as it was, would be taken from me so abruptly. The first sign was a persistent, low-grade fever. I chalked it up to stress, the usual suspects. Long hours, too much coffee, not enough sleep. My job was demanding. The end-of-quarter reports always brutal. I remember telling myself I was just pushing too hard, that I just needed a good night's rest, and things would be back to normal. I popped some over-the-counter pain relievers and pushed through. Work didn't slow down, and neither did I. But the fever didn't go away. It hung over me like a persistent cloud, leaving me feeling weak and achy. The headache started too, a throbbing ache behind my eyes that made it hard to concentrate. My chest felt heavy, each breath a little shallower than the last. I started getting winded walking up the stairs to the apartment. I started getting more tired and even fell asleep on the couch a few times. One evening, I was coughing, a deep, rattling cough that seemed to shake my entire body. Kate glanced up from her phone, a flicker of concern crossing her face. I tried to wave it off, telling her it was just a cold, nothing to worry about. She didn't say anything, but I could see the look of concern. It was a look I had not seen in some time. It had been so long, I'd forgotten the last time I saw it. She insisted that I go to the doctor. I finally relented, figuring a quick checkup would put my mind at ease. The visit wasn't quick. The doctor listened to my chest, his expression growing more serious with each passing moment. He ordered a series of tests, blood work, x-rays, the whole 9 yards. As I waited for the results, I remember feeling this strange sensation in the pit of my stomach. I knew something was wrong, really wrong. The diagnosis hit me like a punch to the gut. Not just a cold, not just stress. Diabetes, type 2, and pneumonia. My body was a mess, ravaged by neglect and bad habits. I had ignored the early warning signs, too busy with work, too convinced that I was invincible. I had always thought of diabetes as something that old people got. I had always thought of myself as healthy. Now, I knew that was not true. The doctor was firm, telling me that I needed to be admitted to the hospital right away. He told me that if I hadn't come in when I did that, it could have gotten much worse. My head spun as I tried to process the news. Hospital? Me? It felt surreal, like I was watching a movie of someone else's life. The next few days were a blur. I was hooked up to IVs, bombarded with medication, and confined to a sterile white room. The world outside the hospital walls faded away as I focused on the rhythm of beeping machines and the slow, painful crawl of time. Every breath was an effort. I had trouble sleeping, the discomfort of my own body keeping me awake. Kate visited when she could, her face drawn with worry. She sat beside my bed, holding my hand, her touch a source of comfort in the sterile environment. I couldn't bring myself to talk about how much pain I was in, how afraid I was. I just watched her, wishing things were different. We talked about the weather, about our families. She did not, nor did I, mention anything about the baseball game on television, or any movies coming out. Work was the last thing on my mind now. The deadlines, the spreadsheets, they all seemed so trivial now. The only thing that mattered was getting better, getting back home. I spent a lot of time alone, wrestling with my own mortality, wondering if things would ever be the same. I was scared, but also felt this sense of desperation. Not just to get back to my life, but to change it, to be better to myself, and maybe even to Kate. I spent some of my time trying to imagine what my life would be if I got out of this hospital. After a month, I was finally discharged. The doctor said my condition was stable, that I would have to make changes but that I would recover. The hospital stay had been grueling, leaving me physically and emotionally drained. But I was alive, and that was all that mattered. I had no idea that my biggest fight wasn't the one I had just fought in the hospital, but one I was about to begin. I was just ready to go home. I was just ready to get back to my life. The cab ride home felt both familiar and alien. The city streets, once so mundane, seemed to pulse with a strange energy, as if the world had shifted while I was away. I was still weak, my body aching from the prolonged inactivity, but a sense of anticipation propelled me forward. I just wanted to get back to my apartment, see Kate, and start to get back to normal. I wanted to sleep in my own bed, eat my own food, and feel like myself again. I paid the driver and stepped out of the cab, taking a deep breath of the cool evening air. The building looked the same, the familiar brick facade a welcome sight. I walked through the lobby and up the stairs to our floor, the keys in my hand feeling heavy. My heart pounded in my chest. I put the key in the lock and turned it. The door clicked open. The apartment was silent. Too silent. I stepped inside, expecting to see Kate, maybe cooking dinner, maybe watching television, but the apartment was empty. Not just empty of Kate, it was empty of everything. My eyes darted around the room, taking in the stark reality. The living room, once cluttered with our furniture, was bare. The couch was gone, the coffee table, the television stand, all of it. The lamps were gone, and the pictures we had hung were taken off the wall. The kitchen was the same. No toaster, no microwave. The dishes were gone from the cupboard. Even the small appliances, the blender, the coffee maker, they were all gone. A cold dread washed over me, a sickening realization dawning in my mind. This wasn't just a mistake, it was intentional. It was as if someone had systematically stripped the place bare, removing every trace of our life together. I felt as if the air had been sucked out of the room, leaving me gasping for breath. My stomach twisted into a tight knot. I was having a hard time taking all of it in. I walked into the bedroom, hoping that this had all been a terrible nightmare. But the bedroom was just as bare as the rest of the apartment. The bed was gone, the dressers, everything. Even some of my personal belongings were missing. My favorite baseball cap, a few of my old movies, some of my shirts, they were all gone. It was like she had meticulously erased herself, and some pieces of me from my life. I tried to call her, my hands trembling as I dialed her number. The call went straight to a disconnected message. I called her again. Same thing. I tried texting her. Nothing. I called her parents, hoping for some answers, some explanation. They hadn't heard from her either. Her phone was off. They had no idea where she was. I had no idea what was going on, but I knew that this was beyond wrong. The initial shock quickly morphed into a burning anger. How could she do this to me? How could she just vanish, taking everything with her? I felt betrayed, humiliated. All the trust I had placed in her, all the years we had spent together, it all felt like a lie. It was like all the foundations that I had built my life on had completely collapsed. Then came the call, a few days later, a voice on the phone, cold and menacing. A loan shark informing me that Kate had taken out a massive loan in my name. He told me that the money was used to buy some things, but that most of it went straight to her and her new friend. It was a sum I couldn't even fathom. A mountain of debt that I was now responsible for. My hands shook as I held the phone, the voice on the other end demanding payment. I felt like I was in free fall, the ground rapidly approaching. I was stunned, my head spinning. The betrayal, the theft, the crushing debt. It was all too much to process. Kate had not just left. She had systematically dismantled my life, leaving me financially ruined and emotionally shattered. I couldn't understand it. Why would she do that? What kind of person does this? The anger, the betrayal, it was all still there, but it was quickly becoming overshadowed by fear and confusion. I had to find her. I had to understand why she did this. I needed answers. But I also knew, deep down, that this wasn't just about finding her. It was about picking up the pieces of my life, trying to figure out how to move on from the devastation she had left behind. The weeks that followed were a blur of anger, frustration, and a grim determination to find Kate. I couldn't just let her get away with this. I couldn't let her destroy my life and then vanish without consequence. The anger I felt was a constant companion, a fuel that kept me going even when I felt like giving up. I found myself thinking about all the things I wanted to say to her and all the things that I wanted to do to her. I couldn't let this anger get the better of me. I knew that going to the police wouldn't get me anywhere quickly. They'd file a report, maybe look into it, but I needed answers now. I needed to find her, and I needed to understand what had happened. I also had to find a way out of this financial mess. The loan sharks were relentless, their calls and texts becoming increasingly aggressive. I felt like I was trapped, cornered by my own circumstances. That's when I remembered the hidden account. I had always been a saver, squirreling away small amounts from each paycheck, a secret stash I had never told Kate about. It was a safety net, a plan B that I had created for myself for emergencies. I had almost forgotten that it existed. It was my lifeline. I didn't know how much I had put into it, but I remembered it was a significant sum. This was it, my last hope to not get completely destroyed by what Kate had done. I went to the bank, a mix of relief and determination washing over me as the teller confirmed the balance. It was enough, more than enough, to not only settle the immediate debt, but to also fund a search for Kate. The relief was immense, but the anger was still there, a cold, burning ember within me. I wasn't just going to pay off the debt. I was going to make sure Kate understood that her actions would not go unpunished. I spent the next few days researching private investigators. I didn't want just anyone. I needed someone discreet, efficient, and effective. I interviewed several candidates before settling on a man named Reynolds. He was quiet, methodical, and had a reputation for getting results. His office was tucked away in a nondescript building downtown. He seemed like someone that knew how to stay off the radar and work discreetly. I explained the situation to Reynolds, showing him the sparse information I had, the disconnected phone number, and the last known address. He listened without interrupting, his eyes sharp and focused. He asked me pointed questions about Kate, her habits, her acquaintances. I tried to tell him everything I knew, hoping it would lead to some answers. He was very professional and very thorough. I had a good feeling about him. Within a week, Reynolds called me. He had found Kate. She was in Mexico, living in a small town near the border with a man named George. Apparently, George had his own connection to the loan sharks, his own set of debts. The information hit me like a physical blow. Kate hadn't just run off. She had run off with someone else, another loser caught in the same cycle of debt. They had taken my money and used it to start a new life together. The betrayal cut deep. The realization that she hadn't just betrayed me, she had replaced me with another man. A man that likely was just as awful and dishonest as she was. The fury surged again, stronger than before. This wasn't just about the money anymore. It was about my life, my dignity, the humiliation of being so easily discarded. It was about everything that I believed in, about what was right and wrong. I sat in my apartment, looking at the bare walls and thinking about the new life Kate was building with another man, with my money. It was like she had taken everything from me, but she did not take my resolve to seek justice. I had found her, and now, with the help of Reynolds and my hidden savings, I had the means to make her pay for what she had done. I knew that I was no longer that man that would just sit by and let life happen to me. I was no longer afraid. The information from Reynolds was like a lit fuse, igniting a plan that had been slowly forming in my mind. I wasn't going to go to the police. I wanted more than just legal justice. I wanted to face Kate, to make her understand the depth of her betrayal. I wanted to make her pay for what she had done to me. The anger had solidified into a cold, calculated resolve. I needed to handle this myself, on my own terms. I contacted the loan sharks again, the same menacing voice on the phone. This time, however, I wasn't the one being threatened. I had something they wanted: information on Kate and George, and the promise of a significant finder's fee. I told them what I knew about the town in Mexico, the rundown villa, and about the money that Kate had taken from me. They were surprisingly cooperative, more interested in getting their money back than they were in collecting from me. They saw Kate and George as a liability, a loose end that they wanted tied up. They were more than happy to have someone else do the dirty work, to have someone else find her and bring her back. I made it clear that this was a business arrangement, not a partnership. I wanted them to bring her to me, and not to hurt her or George. I did not want any physical harm to come to them, not from me, not from them. With the information that Reynolds had provided and the cooperation of the loan sharks, I hired a team, a group of professionals who knew how to operate discreetly, without involving the authorities. They weren't cops, they were specialists, people who knew how to get things done quietly and efficiently. The money from my secret account went to work, funding a carefully planned operation. I wanted to see them face consequences, but I also didn't want to get caught doing things outside of the law. The team tracked Kate and George to a small, isolated town in Mexico. The rundown villa was just as Reynolds had described it, a far cry from the life they thought they had bought with my money. The team watched them for days, gathering intel and waiting for the perfect moment. They saw them leaving the villa, going into town. They knew this was their chance. One afternoon, the team made their move. It wasn't a dramatic raid, more like a subtle, coordinated extraction. They waited for Kate and George to go out, then they moved in. They were both grabbed quietly, efficiently, without any fuss. There were no gunshots, no sirens, just a swift and silent apprehension. Within hours, they were both on their way back to the States, unaware that I was the one behind it. The team did their job, and they did it well. The loan sharks, true to their word, delivered Kate and George to a secure location, a place where they could be held without the involvement of law enforcement. I arrived a few hours later, my heart pounding in my chest as I approached the building. This was it, the moment I had been working towards, the confrontation I had been imagining for weeks. I walked into the room, my eyes locking onto Kate, who was pale and trembling. George stood beside her, his face a mask of arrogance that quickly crumbled as he saw me. The loan sharks stood by, silent observers to the unfolding drama. I looked at her, the woman I had once loved, the woman who had betrayed me so completely. I felt a mix of anger, betrayal, and a fierce determination to make them pay for what they had done. I began to speak, my voice low and controlled, recounting every detail of her betrayal. The theft, the debt, the lies, the new life with George, all of it. George tried to bluster, to deny, to lie his way out of it, but his bravado quickly faded as I presented him with the evidence, the financial records, the photos, everything. Kate, on the other hand, broke down. She started to sob, begging for forgiveness, her tears a pathetic display of crocodile sorrow. I wasn't in the mood for theatrics. I didn't want her forgiveness. I wanted justice. I told them I would make sure they faced consequences. That this wasn't just about money. This was about betrayal, about her destroying a life, her destroying my life. That this was about what she did and what she was. The room was thick with tension, the silence broken only by Kate's sobs and the occasional shift of the loan sharks. I looked at George, his arrogance completely gone, replaced by a desperate fear. He was still trying to find a way out, to weasel his way free, but he knew, deep down, that he was trapped. I watched him as the loan sharks moved in. I had given the loan sharks specific instructions. I didn't want them to physically harm George, but I did want them to make sure that he fully understood the consequences of his actions. They nodded, their faces grim and determined. It wasn't my job to teach him a lesson or to punish him. The loan sharks took over, leading George out of the room. I didn't watch him go. He was no longer my concern. My attention shifted back to Kate. She was still crying, her face red and blotchy, her mascara running down her cheeks. It was hard to believe that this was the same woman I had once shared my life with. Now, she was nothing more than a stranger to me, a reminder of the betrayal and lies that had ripped my life apart. I could have unleashed my anger. I could have yelled, screamed, and demanded answers. I could have even hurt her, but I didn't. I just looked at her, a cold, detached gaze that reflected the emptiness I felt inside. I didn't want to give her the satisfaction of seeing me break down, of seeing me hurt or upset. I knew that would be a victory for her. I'm not going to waste my time yelling at you or demanding answers, I said, my voice calm and steady. You know what you did, you know the damage you caused, and you know that you deserve whatever comes next. My words were like icicles, sharp and cold. I made it clear that she would never get another penny of my money, that the debt she had incurred would follow her for the rest of her life, that wherever she went, whatever she tried to do with her life, she would always have the weight of her actions hanging over her. I explained that this wasn't just a financial loss for me, it was a total collapse of my life and the trust I had put in her. You made your choices. Now you have to live with them, I said, my voice devoid of emotion. With that, I turned and walked away, leaving her alone in the room with her tears and her despair. I had no interest in listening to her cries or watching her try to make excuses. There was nothing left to say. The loan sharks were true to their word. They took George to their secure location, where he would no doubt learn the full extent of his errors. I didn't want to know what happened there. I just wanted them to do what they needed to do so that they did not continue to ruin other people's lives. After that experience, I decided to cut all ties with the life I had known. I sold my apartment, the remaining belongings that Kate hadn't stolen, all of it. The money wasn't enough to cover the losses, but it was enough to start again. I paid off the rest of the loan that she had taken out, ending that chapter of my life. I took a portion of the remaining money and invested it, while the rest was set aside for a new life, a new future. I didn't want to remember the place. I didn't want any physical reminder of it. The pain of that place, of that relationship was too great to live with anymore. I needed to move on. I needed to start over. I felt a sense of closure, a sense that I had finally dealt with the situation on my own terms. It was far from perfect, but it was over. I had faced the betrayal. I had confronted the people who had harmed me, and I had survived. Now, it was time to start living for myself, time to build a new life, free from the ghosts of the past,